Don Frye, one of the most iconic fighters from the early days of the UFC, has faced a tragic turn in his life as he enters his 60s. Once known for his brutal fighting style, unrelenting power, and fearless persona in the octagon, Frye's later years have been marked by health issues, financial struggles, and personal regrets. A pioneer of mixed martial arts, Frye helped shape the sport's early days, but now, decades removed from his peak, he battles the consequences of a career that was defined by violence and aggression. At 60, Frye's body has deteriorated, his finances have dwindled, and his once larger-than-life persona has been replaced with a quieter, more reflective existence. This video dives into the tragic life of Don Frye at 60, exploring how a man who once lived for the fight now faces the aftermath of a brutal and unforgettable career. Don Frye was born on November 23, 1965, in Susanville, California, and was drawn to the world of combat sports from an early age. Growing up with a strong background in wrestling, Frye eventually made his way into the world of mixed martial arts, a sport that was just beginning to take shape in the early 1990s. His athleticism, combined with his aggressive mindset, set him apart from other fighters of the time, and Frye quickly became known for his brutal style inside the cage. Frye's UFC debut came in 1996 at UFC 8, where he earned the UFC tournament title and immediately became a standout figure in the organization. What set Frye apart from many other fighters in those early UFC days was his raw aggression, fearlessness, and ability to adapt to the chaos that was the hallmark of mixed martial arts in its infancy. He didn't rely on technicality or finesse. Instead, Frye simply outmuscled and outlasted his opponents. His battles were often decided by sheer willpower and an unrelenting pursuit of victory. During the early UFC tournaments, Frye's reputation as a tough, no-nonsense fighter grew. He became known for his fearless approach to fighting. He was willing to take on anyone, no matter their size or skill set. It was this aggressive mentality that helped build Frye into one of the most popular fighters of the late 1990s. Fans loved his direct approach to fighting, and his brawling style helped cement him as one of the UFC's first true stars. Throughout his career, Frye continued to make waves in the UFC, taking on legends like Ken Shamrock and Royce Gracie, solidifying his place in the history of MMA. His victories, such as his legendary 1996 fight against Thomas Ramirez, were brutal affairs that showcased his immense strength and stamina. As the UFC grew, so did Frye's reputation, making him a household name and an integral part of the sport's evolution. However, as his fame grew, so did the consequences of his fighting career and the toll it would take on his body and mind in the years to come. In the late 1990s, Don Frye was one of the dominant figures in UFC's early years. His fighting style was aggressive and straightforward, built on his solid wrestling background, but also heavily relying on his immense strength and knockout power. Unlike many modern fighters who focus on technique and strategy, Frye relied on his ability to take damage and keep fighting, a trait that earned him his place as one of the most feared competitors in mixed martial arts history. Frye's career took off when he captured the UFC 8 tournament title in 1996, defeating a series of notable fighters in a fashion that was both brutal and compelling. His ability to overwhelm opponents with raw power and ferocity made him an instant fan favorite. Frye's brawler mentality resonated with fans who loved watching the sport's early days, which were filled with chaos, unpredictability, and violence. Frye's success in the UFC was not just due to his strength, but also his ability to capitalize on the lack of refinement in MMA during that era. One of his most iconic moments came in UFC 8 when he defeated Thomas Ramirez in the final. Ramirez, a well-established fighter in the early UFC scene, was no match for Frye's relentless ground and pound and powerful strikes. Frye's victory was definitive and violent, earning him the title and the recognition as one of the top fighters in the promotion. As UFC transitioned from tournament-style events to more structured matchups, Frye remained a central figure, taking on some of the most dangerous fighters of the time. Frye's rivalries helped define his career. His infamous fights with fighters like Ken Shamrock, Kevin Randleman, and Tank Abbott solidified his place in MMA history. The fights were often marked by brutal exchanges, with Frye earning a reputation for being one of the toughest men in the sport. His battle with Abbott in UFC 20 became one of the sport's most memorable, with both fighters exchanging heavy blows, a match that showcased Frye's endurance and aggression. Despite the physical toll these brutal battles took, Frye's fame continued to grow. His iconic mustache, larger-than-life personality, and hard-hitting style made him a household name. Frye's success in the UFC helped pave the way for the sport's future. He was part of the initial wave of fighters who helped define MMA and pushed it into the mainstream. But despite his success, Frye's aggressive style and reckless fighting habits began to take a toll on his body, setting the stage for the struggles that would come in his later years. As he rose to fame, the consequences of his fighting career were already beginning to take shape, and the warrior mentality that made him a star was also setting him on a collision course with personal and physical decline. As Don Frye's career continued into the 2000s, the wear and tear of his brutal fighting style began to manifest in more significant ways. Frye had always been known for his toughness and his ability to take punishment, but as he aged, the consequences of his reckless style became undeniable. Repeated concussions, joint issues, and muscle strains from his years of fighting took a severe toll on Frye's body. Fighters like him, who rely on raw strength and brawling tactics rather than technical finesse, often pay the price when they get older, and Frye was no exception. By the time Frye reached his 40s, his body was breaking down. His joints, which had absorbed years of punishment, began to hurt constantly. His back, once a source of power in his takedowns and ground control, became a painful reminder of his past. Chronic pain became a part of his daily life, and Frye struggled to stay active and mobile. These physical issues were compounded by cognitive problems, likely due to the repeated head injuries he had sustained throughout his career. Memory issues, difficulty concentrating, and occasional mood swings were early signs of what would become a more significant issue. The emotional toll of his physical decline added another layer of difficulty to Frye's life. As his health worsened, so did his mental state. Frye began to wrestle with depression, feeling frustrated and hopeless as his body failed him. The man who had once prided himself on being the toughest fighter in the room now found himself struggling to keep up with the physical demands of everyday life. His once larger-than-life persona, built on aggression, strength, and an indomitable will, was slowly fading, leaving him feeling isolated and disconnected from the sport and fans who had once adored him. In addition to his physical health, Frye's personal life began to take a hit as well. The relationships that had sustained him during his UFC years began to falter under the weight of his personal struggle. His inability to manage his emotions, along with the demands of his fighting career, led to strained relationships with friends and family members. As he retreated further into isolation, the loneliness and regrets began to eat away at him. Frye's once promising future outside the octagon was marked by instability, both physically and emotionally, setting the stage for the difficult years that lay ahead. Despite Don Frye's success in the UFC and his iconic status in the sport's history, his financial situation has been a significant issue in his later years. Like many fighters from the early days of the UFC, Frye didn't benefit from the massive paydays or sponsorship deals that modern fighters enjoy. During the 90s and early 2000s, the UFC was still finding its footing, and fighters didn't have the same level of financial support or career longevity that fighters in today's era experience. Frye, who earned money through his brutal battles inside the octagon, spent much of his wealth on his personal lifestyle. Without a solid plan for saving and investing, the income from his early UFC years quickly dissipated. While many fighters from that era were able to capitalize on their fame by transitioning into coaching, promotions, or business ventures, Frye struggled to build a post-fighting career that could sustain him financially. Instead, he found himself living off sporadic work, appearances, and smaller opportunities in the fighting world. Frye has openly admitted to his lack of financial planning during his peak years, and it's evident in his current current situation. As his health deteriorated and his fighting career ended, Frye found it difficult to maintain a steady income. His failed attempts at acting and coaching, coupled with a lack of long-term business acumen, left him financially unstable. Despite his fame and early wealth, Frye has been forced to navigate the grim reality of living paycheck to paycheck without the financial cushion that many of his contemporaries were able to secure. As he grew older, Frye's financial struggles became even more apparent. The physical toll of his fighting career, coupled with the lack of sufficient income, created a difficult situation for the aging fighter. While Frye was able to live a comfortable lifestyle for a time, his lack of preparation for life after fighting left him vulnerable to financial ruin. These struggles, combined with his declining health, have become an unfortunate reality for a man who once lived at the top of the combat sports world. As Don Frye moved into his 50s, the physical toll of his fighting career became increasingly apparent. Fighters like Frye, who relied on a brawling, relentless style, often suffer the consequences of such a demanding and punishing approach to combat. While Frye was once known for his immense strength, endurance, and ability to absorb punishment, his body has now begun to betray him in ways that no one, not even Frye himself, could have foreseen. The injuries that were once a part of his career, joint pain, muscle strains, back issues, have now turned into chronic, debilitating conditions. Frye has spoken about the constant pain he experiences in his knees, back, and joints, all of which have been severely damaged by years of intense fighting. His once powerful body, which was once a tool of destruction, has become a source of daily discomfort. Frye's ability to engage in physical activities outside of fighting has diminished, and he is often restricted by the toll his career has taken on his body. Perhaps the most troubling aspect of his health decline is the neurological damage he has sustained. The repeated head trauma he endured during his brutal UFC bouts has left Frye with signs of cognitive decline. He has admitted to struggling with memory loss, confusion, and other cognitive issues that are often linked to conditions like chronic traumatic encephalopathy, CTE. Frye's mental health struggles are compounded by his physical pain, creating a constant battle between his mind and body. The effects of CTE have left Frye feeling as though he is losing touch with his own past and identity. The man who once seemed invincible in the octagon is now finding himself physically broken, unable to move with the same speed and power that once defined him. For a man who built his career on toughness and the ability to push through any pain, the realization that his body is no longer capable of those feats is a bitter pill to swallow. Frye's aging process has been harsh, and it serves as a reminder of the price that many fighters pay for their careers in combat sports. Don Frye's life has been marked by personal struggles as much as physical and financial ones. His reputation as a tough, no-nonsense fighter was both a blessing and a curse. While it made him a fan favorite and a force inside the octagon, it also alienated him from those closest to him. Frye's larger-than-life persona and his willingness to push boundaries both inside and outside the cage made it difficult for him to maintain meaningful personal relationships. Frye's aggressive, sometimes abrasive personality translated poorly in his personal life. His relationships with his family, friends, and romantic partners were often strained by his inability to balance his tough guy image with emotional vulnerability. Frye has admitted that his inability to emotionally connect with others and his focus on his fighting career led to failed marriages and fractured friendships. The emotional toll of his fighting career, combined with his tough exterior, made it difficult for him to build the kind of supportive, lasting relationships that many people rely on in their later years. As Frye entered his 50s, the sense of isolation grew stronger, with fewer people around him and the loss of the camaraderie he once had in the fighting community. Frye became more isolated. He has spoken about how the transition from a public figure with constant attention to a quieter, more private life has been difficult to cope with. His fame in the UFC has faded, and with it, so has his sense of purpose and self-worth. The loneliness that Frye feels today is compounded by the health issues he faces. His declining physical health makes it difficult for him to engage in the activities that once brought him joy. His body, which was once his most powerful asset, now serves as a constant reminder of what he has lost. This combination of isolation, regret, and physical pain has led Frye to reflect deeply on his past choices. He has expressed regret over not focusing more on his personal life and relationships during his prime years, and the impact of his aggressive lifestyle on those closest to him is something that now weighs heavily on him. As Don Frye moves deeper into his 50s, he finds himself grappling with a painful reality. His days of being a UFC legend are far behind him, and he struggles to stay relevant in an industry that has evolved without him. MMA has changed drastically since Frye's heyday. The fighters are younger, more technical, and have far better conditioning than the brawlers of the past. The landscape of the UFC is filled with skilled athletes who have mastered mixed martial arts and adapted to the ever-changing dynamics of the sport. Unfortunately, for someone like Frye, who relied on sheer toughness and raw power, the evolution of the sport has left him in the dust. Despite the growing gap between him and today's athletes, Frye has made several attempts to stay in the public eye. He's tried his hand at coaching, acting, and even podcasting, but none of these ventures have been able to reignite the fame he once enjoyed. While he remains a well-known name among die-hard MMA fans, his relevance in the mainstream has significantly diminished. His efforts to return to the spotlight are often overshadowed by younger, more marketable fighters. The sport has evolved, and many of Frye's peers, including those who fought alongside him in the early UFC days, have found new roles as analysts, trainers, or influencers in the MMA world, but Frye's attempts at these roles haven't been as successful. Frye has expressed frustration with his fading fame, and the realization that the spotlight has shifted elsewhere has been a tough pill to swallow. As his health deteriorates and the number of opportunities for older fighters dwindles, Frye's struggles to maintain relevance have taken a toll on his mental and emotional well-being. The man who once dominated the UFC, striking fear into his opponents with his raw aggression, now faces the uncomfortable truth that the fire that once fueled his career has burned out. The sense of being left behind is a bitter realization, one that Frye continues to confront as he navigates the reality of aging and an ever-evolving sport. Despite his status as an iconic fighter in the early days of the UFC, Don Frye's financial future has been far from secure. Unlike many modern fighters who have managed to parlay their fame into lucrative post-fight careers, Frye's lack of financial foresight and preparation for life after fighting have left him in a difficult position. The UFC in Frye's prime was not nearly as financially lucrative for its fighters as it is today. Fighters in the early years of the promotion often had to rely on their next fight to generate income, and long-term sponsorship deals, endorsements, and branding were often not as abundant as they are now. While Frye earned decent money during his time in the UFC, much of it was spent on maintaining his lifestyle, which was often as fast-paced and reckless as his fighting career. Known for living large, Frye's financial management was less than ideal. He didn't save enough, invest wisely, or plan for the future, mistakes that have caught up with him now that his fighting career has ended. In interviews, Frye has admitted that he didn't think much about what would happen after his career, and now the lack of retirement funds, investments, or a post-fight career has led to significant struggle. After leaving the UFC, Frye struggled to find consistent work. The fame he built in the cage didn't translate into long-term financial stability. Although he made sporadic appearances in television, acting, and smaller promotions, these efforts didn't bring in the financial security he needed. Without a regular income and few solid business ventures, Frye has faced financial hardship. This has been particularly difficult given his ongoing health issues, which have kept him from being able to pursue the kinds of opportunities that could have helped him stabilize his finances. Frye has been forced to rely on public appearances and a few odd jobs to make ends meet. The fighter who once earned six-figure paydays now finds himself struggling to get by. This harsh reality of financial instability is one that many retired fighters face, and for Frye, it has become a major point of stress and regret. The inability to secure a stable financial future after such a legendary career is a harsh reminder of how fleeting fame and fortune can be in the brutal world of combat sports. As Don Frye approaches his 60s, he finds himself reflecting on his life and legacy legacy in a way that he never did during his years of fighting. Known for his brawling, no-nonsense fighting style, and for being one of the most feared men in the early UFC, Frye built a legacy that will always be remembered by those who witnessed the birth of MMA. However, as time moves on and his health and finances decline, Frye's legacy has become a bittersweet part of his life. Frye has openly acknowledged the mistakes he made during his fighting career, from poor financial planning to not taking care of his body. He was known for his aggressive, all-out fighting style, but the years of physical punishment have left him struggling with chronic pain, cognitive decline, and health issues that he cannot undo. The legacy of the tank persona, once a symbol of toughness and strength, is now intertwined with the pain and regret that accompanies aging. The impact of his MMA career, however, remains undeniable. He was one of the first true stars of the UFC and played a pivotal role in shaping the sport in its infancy. His brutal battles and larger-than-life personality helped make the UFC what it is today. Yet, Frye's career and his impact on the sport stand in stark contrast to the struggles he faces in his later years. He's become a relic of the past, a reminder of an era that no longer exists in the rapidly evolving world of MMA. Frye has often spoken about the emotional toll that his career has taken on him, and as he nears the end of his life, he seems to have come to terms with the fact that his time in the spotlight has passed. The man who once thrived in the chaos of the cage is now a quieter figure, reflecting on his choices and the toll they've taken on his body, mind, and relationships. The final chapter of his legacy may not be the one he envisioned when he was in the midst of his UFC fame, but it is a story that will resonate with anyone who has followed the rise and fall of MMA legends. Frye's journey is far from over, but as he faces the physical, financial, and emotional consequences of his past, the question remains: can he find peace with the life he's lived, or will the shadows of his past continue to define his legacy in his final years?